All right, so let's jump right into it today. We're going to be tackling Mac Mini M4 storage upgrades. We're going deep on this one, folks. You've probably noticed the new Mac Mini M4 is a beast. Performance-wise, it's incredible. But that base model storage, yeah, it can feel a little limited. Don't worry, we've got you covered. We dug through a whole bunch of sources to break down the best storage solutions for you, whether we're talking NAS, external SSDs, or even network upgrades. And you might be surprised to learn a network upgrade might not be the silver bullet you think it is.
Yeah, it's a common misconception. People think faster network equals faster everything. Our sources did some really fascinating real-world testing, and the results are pretty interesting.
So let's paint a picture of what a typical Mac Mini user might have. A lot of folks are using something like a Synology DS423 plus NAS system. Wired connections are hitting around 930 millibps. Wi-Fi transfer rates that kind of hover between 60 to 80 millibps per second. And standard wired transfers land somewhere between 80 and 100 millibps per second. Those speeds sound pretty decent, but are they really enough? What if you're working with large video files? Or trying to run a demanding application right off your NAS?
That's where things get interesting when we're talking about pure performance. External SSDs are the clear winner. They blow those speeds out of the water, reaching up to 1,000 millibps per second over USB-C. That kind of speed means snappier application loading, smoother video editing, just generally a more responsive experience overall.
Hold on. 1,000 millibps per second. That's like 10 times faster than the standard wired transfer speeds we were just talking about. No wonder people are raving about external SSDs. Plus, direct connection like that seems like it would be way more reliable than relying on a network, right?
Absolutely. Fewer points of failure means it's more stable and consistent experience. You're not dealing with network hiccups or potential bottlenecks. And the beauty of external SSDs is the simplicity. They're plug and play. No complicated setup or configuration needed. Just plug it in and you're good to go.
Okay, I'm starting to see the appeal here. But wouldn't a faster network still be beneficial? Like if you're transferring massive files between your Mac Mini and your NASs?
It's a fair question, and we'll definitely dig into that network upgrade myth a little bit later. But for now, let's stick with these speedy external SSDs. What's really exciting is the variety of options out there. You've got portable SSDs like the Samsung T7 for folks on the go, and then for those who want more flexibility and control, there are custom Thunderbolt enclosures, where you can choose your own NVMe drive.
NVMe, you'd have to break that one down for me. What makes those drives so special?
NVMe drives use a different interface than traditional SATA SSDs, allowing them to take full advantage of the PCI Express bus in your Mac Mini. Think of it like a dedicated express lane for data transfer. This means significantly faster read and write speeds, especially for large files and demanding applications.
So that's why those NVMe enclosures are popular with power users. They're like the Ferraris of the storage world.
Exactly. And if you're doing things like professional video editing
Yeah.
or working with large data sets, that extra speed can make a huge difference in your workflow. You'll spend less time waiting for files to load or transfer and more time being productive.
Okay, I'm sold on the external SSDs. They sound like a game changer.
Yeah.
But we can't forget about NAS, right? A lot of people rely on them for their media libraries and backups.
NAS definitely has its place. While it might not be ideal for running applications directly because of the speed limitations we talked about, it's a rock star when it comes to storing large media libraries, handling backups, keeping your data secure.
So it sounds like we're talking about a two-pronged approach here. A fast external SSD for your main workspace and applications, and a trusty NAS for your media library, backups, and less frequently accessed files.
That's a great way to put it. And the beauty of this setup is that it caters to a wide range of needs and budgets. You can start with a smaller SSD and a basic NAS setup, and scale up as your needs grow.
This is already making me rethink my entire Mac Mini setup. But before we get too ahead of ourselves, let's break down these different storage options in a little more detail and figure out what makes the most sense for different types of users.
Sounds good to me. We'll cover everything from choosing the right SSD to setting up your NAS and optimizing your network for the best possible performance.
Awesome. I'm excited to dive into that. Let's take a quick break, and we'll be right back. All right, so we've established those external SSDs are the speed demons of the Mac Mini storage world. Well, let's shift gears for a sec and tackle the elephant in the room, the network upgrade myth. I think a lot of us, we've fallen into this trap of thinking faster network equals faster everything. But is that really true?
It's a tempting assumption.
Right.
We think if our network is the bottleneck, then upgrading is going to magically solve all of our performance problems. But the research that we've been looking at reveals a much more nuanced picture.
Okay.
These sources actually put this to the test, trying out different network upgrade paths, like bumping up to a 10G network port, adding a USB to 2.5G adapter, and even installing a full-blown 2.5G network switch.
Wow, that's pretty serious commitment to testing this out.
Uh,
So what were the results? Did they see massive speed improvements?
Surprisingly, no. The performance gains were actually pretty minimal, especially for everyday tasks, like browsing the web, checking email, working on documents, even for more demanding activities, like video editing or transferring large files. The improvements weren't nearly as dramatic as you might expect.
So even with a supercharged network, those everyday tasks weren't noticeably faster. That's kind of counterintuitive. Why wouldn't a faster network translate to a faster overall experience?
It's all about understanding the limitations of different components in your system. In a lot of cases, the actual bottleneck isn't the network itself, it's the hard drives or SSDs you're using. Upgrading your network to 10G isn't going to make your hard drive spin any faster.
That makes sense. So if you're still using a spinning hard drive, even a super fast network isn't going to magically make everything faster.
Exactly. It's like having a race car stuck in traffic. All that power, wasted if it can't actually move. Same principle applies to your Mac Mini and its storage. If your storage is slow, a faster network won't make a noticeable difference.
Okay, network upgrade myth busted. But hold on, you mentioned that there were some performance gains for tasks like video editing and large file transfers. So there must be some cases where a network upgrade would be beneficial.
Right. You're absolutely right. If you're regularly transferring massive amounts of data between your Mac Mini and a NAS, or if you're collaborating on large projects with multiple users on the network, then a faster network can definitely improve your workflow.
So for those power users who are pushing the limits of their network, an upgrade might be worthwhile. But for the average Mac Mini user, who's mainly browsing the web, checking email, doing some light work, sticking with a standard gigabit Ethernet connection is probably fine.
Exactly. Gigabit Ethernet is still a very capable technology, and for most users, it provides more than enough bandwidth for a smooth and enjoyable experience. Remember those speeds we talked about earlier? 930 Mbps pieces. That's nothing to sneeze at. It can easily handle multiple 4K video streams, large file downloads, even some light gaming.
It's a relief to know that we don't all need to rush out and buy expensive network upgrades. But let's get practical for a moment. For those listeners who are considering a network upgrade, what are some things they should keep in mind?
Great question. First and foremost, consider the cost and the complexity of the upgrade. Upgrading to a 10G network can be quite expensive, requiring new network cards, switches, cabling, and setting it all up correctly can be a real headache, especially if you're not super tech savvy.
Yeah, I can imagine getting lost in a maze of cables and settings. It's not exactly plug and play.
Definitely not. And there are other factors to consider as well, like compatibility. With your existing hardware and software, not all devices and applications support faster network speeds, so you'll want to do your research before making any big investments.
So before jumping on the network upgrade bandwagon, it's crucial to assess your actual needs and weigh the potential benefits against the cost and the complexity of the upgrade. If you're just using your Mac Mini for basic tasks, chances are you can save yourself a lot of money and hassle by sticking with gigabit Ethernet.
Absolutely. And remember, technology's constantly evolving. What seems like a cutting-edge upgrade today might be obsolete in a few years. It's better to focus on getting the most out of your current setup and upgrading only when you have a clear need and a solid understanding of the costs and benefits involved.
That's great advice. Now, before we move on to specific storage recommendations for different use cases, I'm curious, in all your research on this topic, what were some of the most surprising things you learned?
One of the things that really surprised me was the sheer variety of external SSDs available. It's not just about capacity and speed anymore. There are SSDs designed for portability, ruggedness, security, even gaming. Some even come with built-in hardware encryption to protect your data.
Wow, that's impressive. It's like the external SSD market has become a whole ecosystem of its own.
It really has, and that's why it's so important to do your research and choose an SSD that aligns with your specific needs and priorities. Do you value portability above all else? Are you concerned about data security? Or are you looking for the absolute fastest speeds possible? There's an SSD out there for every type of user.
Speaking of different types of users, let's dive into some specific recommendations. Earlier, we talked about a two-pronged approach: external SSDs for speed and NAS for media libraries and backups. But how does this translate to different user needs? What if someone's mainly using their Mac Mini for media consumption, for example?
That's a great scenario to explore. For someone who's primarily using their Mac Mini as a media center, the focus shifts away from raw speed and towards storage capacity and smooth playback.
So would an external SSD still be the primary recommendation in this case?
It depends on the size of their media library. If they're dealing with terabytes of movies, music, and photos, a NAS system makes more sense. From a cost per gigabyte perspective, SSDs are still more expensive per gigabyte than hard drives. So for massive media libraries, a NAS with high-capacity hard drives is a more practical choice.
Yeah, it makes sense. It wouldn't be very cost-effective to fill up a 4 TB SSD with movies.
Exactly. But here's the thing. Even for media consumption, there's still a role for external SSDs. Remember, the Mac Mini's internal storage is often limited, especially on those base models.
So what you're saying is even if their main media library lives on a NAS, they might still want an external SSD to supplement the Mac Mini's internal storage.
Precisely. They could use that SSD to store the operating system, applications, and a few frequently accessed files, ensuring that their system runs smoothly and responsively.
Okay, so for our media-loving Mac Mini users, we're talking about a hybrid approach. A NAS for the bulk of their media library, and a smaller SSD to handle the operating system, applications, and any files that need quick access. What about those folks who are using their Mac Mini for more demanding tasks, like video editing or software development?
For those power users, the external SSD becomes even more crucial. They need the fastest possible speeds to handle large files and demanding applications. In this scenario, I'd recommend investing in a larger capacity SSD, perhaps 2 TB or even 4 TB, depending on their needs.
And what about the network upgrade question for these power users? Would a faster network make a difference in their workflows?
It could, if they're constantly transferring large files between their Mac Mini and a NAS, or if they're working on collaborative projects where multiple users need to access shared files. A faster network can definitely improve efficiency and reduce bottlenecks.
So for power users, it's worth considering a network upgrade, but only after carefully assessing their specific needs and understanding the cost and complexity involved.
Exactly. And remember, even if they don't upgrade their entire network, there are still ways to optimize their existing setup for better performance. We'll talk about some of those tips in a bit.
All right. So we've covered a lot of ground here. We've busted the network upgrade myth, explored the benefits of external SSDs, and outlined some general storage strategies for different types of Mac Mini users. But let's get even more specific. What are some specific SSD models you'd recommend for different needs and budgets?
That's a great question. Let's start with the portable SSDs. The Samsung T7 is a popular choice, offering a great balance of speed, portability, and affordability. It's compact, lightweight, and comes in a variety of capacities, making it perfect for folks on the go.
I've heard great things about the SanDisk Extreme Portable SSD as well. It's supposed to be super durable and even water resistant.
That's right. If you're looking for an SSD that can withstand a bit of rough handling, the SanDisk Extreme Portable is a fantastic option. It's also very fast, with read and write speeds that rival the Samsung T7.
Okay, so for portable SSDs, we've got the Samsung T7 for all-around excellence, and the SanDisk Extreme Portable for ruggedness and durability. What about those NVMe enclosures we talked about earlier? What are some good options for power users who want to build their own custom storage solutions?
There are a ton of great NVMe enclosures out there. One popular choice is the OWC Envoy Pro FX. It's a Thunderbolt 3 enclosure that supports incredibly fast NVMe drives and offers excellent heat dissipation to keep your drive running cool under heavy workloads.
That sounds like a serious piece of hardware, and I bet it doesn't come cheap.
It's definitely an investment, but for power users who demand the best possible performance, it's worth every penny. Another great option is the Sabrent Rocket XTRM-Q. It's a ruggedized Thunderbolt 3 enclosure that's designed for both speed and durability. It even has a built-in fan to keep your drive cool during intense data transfers.
So for NVMe enclosures, we've got the OWC Envoy Pro FX for top-of-the-line performance, and the Sabrent Rocket XTRM-Q for a balance of speed, durability, and affordability. That's a lot of great options. But before we overwhelm our listeners with even more choices, let's take a step back and talk about how to choose the right storage solution for your specific needs.
That's a great idea. Let's break it down into a few key factors to consider.
Perfect. So what's the first thing people should think about when choosing a storage solution for their Mac Mini?
Well, it can definitely feel overwhelming with all the options out there. But let's break it down into a few key questions. First, think about how you primarily use your Mac Mini. Are you a casual user? mainly browsing the web, checking email, doing some light work? Or are you a power user, working with large video files, massive data sets, or demanding applications?
That makes sense. Your needs are going to dictate what kind of storage setup makes the most sense. So let's say I'm a casual user. What kind of storage solution would you recommend?
For casual users, simplicity and affordability are key. You probably don't need a ton of storage space, and you're not really pushing your system to its limits with demanding tasks. So in this case, a smaller capacity external SSD, perhaps 500 gigabit or 1 TB would be a great upgrade. It'll give you a noticeable boost in speed and responsiveness for everyday tasks, and it won't break the bank.
And what about backups for casual users? Should they be looking at a NAS for that?
That's a great point. Backups are essential for everyone, regardless of how they use their Mac Mini. For casual users, a simple and affordable NAS solution could be a great way to keep their data safe. They could even use a cloud backup service, like Backblaze or Carbonite, for some extra peace of mind.
So for casual users, we're talking about a smaller SSD for their main workspace and a simple backup solution, whether it's a NAS or a cloud service. That sounds pretty manageable. And what about our power users? They're working with much larger files and more demanding applications. What kind of storage setup would you recommend for them?
Power users, they need speed, capacity, and flexibility. For their main workspace, a larger capacity external SSD, ideally 2 TB or 4 TB would be ideal. This will give them ample space for their projects, applications, frequently accessed files, and the blazing fast speeds of an SSD. That'll ensure a smooth and efficient workflow.
And what about their media libraries and backups? Would a NAS still be a good fit for power users?
Absolutely. Even power users have massive media libraries and important files that need to be backed up. A NAS system with multiple high-capacity hard drives would be perfect for storing their media collection, handling backups, and even serving as a central hub for sharing files with other devices on their network.
Okay, so for power users, we're talking about a larger SSD for their main workspace and a more robust NAS system for media.
Backups and
Yeah.
file sharing. That makes sense. But I imagine they might also benefit from a faster network connection, right?
You're right. If they're constantly transferring large files
Yeah.
between their Mac Mini and their NAS, or if they're collaborating with others on their network, a faster network connection can definitely improve their workflow. So for those power users, who are pushing the limits of their network? What are some things they can do to optimize their setup?
Well, first, they could consider upgrading their router to a model that supports faster speeds. There are plenty of affordable routers on the market that offer gigabit Ethernet ports, and even faster technologies like Wi-Fi 6.
And what about those fancy 10G network upgrades we talked about earlier? Are those worth considering for power users?
If they have a very specific need for those ultra-fast speeds, then a 10G upgrade might be worthwhile. But it's important to remember that it can be a pretty costly and complex upgrade, requiring new network cards, switches, and cabling.
Yeah, it's not a decision to be taken lightly. So
Sure.
before jumping on the 10G bandwagon, it's crucial to weigh the costs and benefits.
Yeah.
Make sure it's the right solution for their specific needs.
Exactly. And there are other things they can do to optimize their network performance without going to the extreme of a 10G upgrade. For example, they can make sure their Mac Mini and NAS are connected directly to their router with Ethernet cables. Instead of relying on Wi-Fi, this can significantly improve transfer speeds and reduce latency.
That's a great tip. It's amazing how much of a difference a simple wired connection can make.
Yeah.
So to recap for power users, we're talking about a larger SSD for their main workspace, a robust NAS for media and backups, and a potentially faster network connection or optimized network setup. That's a pretty powerful combination.
It really is. And with the right storage and network setup, their Mac Mini can become a true powerhouse for productivity and creativity. This has been an incredibly informative deep dive. We've busted myths, explored cutting-edge technology, and hopefully empowered our listeners to make informed decisions about their Mac Mini storage setup. Absolutely. And remember, there's no one-size-fits-all solution. The best approach is to carefully consider your individual needs, budget, and technical expertise, and choose a solution that aligns with your unique workflow.
So whether you're a casual user looking for a simple upgrade or a power user pushing the limits of your Mac Mini, we hope this deep dive has given you the knowledge and confidence to create the perfect storage setup for your needs.
And if you have any questions or want to share your own experiences with Mac Mini storage, please leave a comment below. We love hearing from our listeners and learning from each other.
And that's a wrap on this deep dive into Mac Mini storage. Until next time, happy computing.